lot of material that is covered on the bar exam, and it can be a little bit overwhelming. So in this video, I'm going to give you some tips for how to manage and learn everything that you need to know for the bar exam. The first thing that you should do to manage all of this information is to make a study schedule. When you start studying for the bar exam, decide right away when you're going to cover each of the subjects and how much time you're going to spend on each subject. So let's say, for example, you're going to study for the bar exam for 10 weeks. And let's say that your bar exam has 14 subjects that are tested on that exam. I recommend that you save about 2 weeks at the end for sheer review. So you should not be learning new material in those final 2 weeks right before the exam. So that means you have about 8 weeks to learn all 14 subjects that you're going to need to know for the bar exam. So if you break down those 14 subjects, that means you're going to be doing about 2 subjects per week. There'll be a couple weeks where you are only going to do 1, but for the most part, you'll have about 2 subjects to cover per week. By breaking it down like this at the very beginning, you're going to make it much more manageable. So this way you don't walk into week 1 thinking, I have 14 subjects to learn. I've really got to cover everything all at once. No, you have plenty of time to learn all 14 subjects. In that first week, your job is to work on the 1 or maybe 2 subjects that you're going to learn that week. You don't need to learn everything at once. Make it manageable. So setting this up in advance will allow you to see that you still have plenty of time to learn everything, and it's going to let you stay on track with those subjects that you're covering each individual week. In addition to breaking it down like this, where you pre-decide what subjects you're going to cover each week, you should break it down even smaller and memorize the information in small chunks. So let's say, for instance, that your subject to cover this week is torts. Rather than sitting down with your very long torts outline and saying, I'm going to sit here and read this whole thing until I've read it all, and I hope some of it sticks with me in my head. Don't make it unbearable and unmanageable. Take it in much smaller chunks. So sit down and say, I'm going to read the first 10 pages of my torts outline, and I'm just going to get through negligence. Or maybe even smaller than that. Maybe you just say, I'm just going to get through the duty element of negligence. Make it manageable. It's going to make it much easier for you to actually be productive, to accomplish goals, and to keep moving forward. Also, as you're spending time memorizing and learning the material, make sure you're spending more time on the highly tested topics and subjects. Not all topics are tested equally. 7 subjects are always tested on the MBE or multiple choice portion of the bar exam. You know that those topics are guaranteed to come up. Those include civil procedure, criminal law and criminal procedure, contracts, constitutional law, evidence, real property, and torts. They're guaranteed to come up. Any essay subjects that may come up on your essay portion of the exam may be tested a little bit differently. Maybe they're not always tested. So you want to make sure you're allocating plenty of time to those topics that are guaranteed to show up, particularly on the MBE portion of the exam. Within each subject, not all topics are tested equally. In torts, for instance, on the MBE portion of the exam, you'll get 25 torts questions. 12 to 13 of those torts questions are going to be testing negligence. Compare that to something like defamation that might be a question or 2, but isn't worth nearly as many points as negligence. So you want to make sure that you're spending plenty of time on those highly tested topics. They're going to be worth way more points on the exam. After you review and memorize your outlines, begin to incorporate some practice questions. You don't have to be done memorizing before you incorporate practice questions, but you should at least start to memorize and start to review before diving straight into practice questions. That'll give you a better idea of the law that you're going to be applying in those questions, rather than learning that law for the first time in the question. By incorporating some practice questions, you're going to start to see how they test certain things. That way, when you go back and continue memorizing, you can keep in mind how they test things and make sure you're memorizing the right amount of detail, you're memorizing the rules the right way, and things like that. Now, after that week that you've assigned a particular subject to, you want to make sure that you come back to that subject a few times after that. I recommend once a week, you should, at the end of the week, go back and review all of the other subjects that you've already reviewed so far. Because let's say in week 1, you cover real property. If that's the last time you look at real property before the bar exam, chances are it's not going to stick with you. So instead, after you learn real property in week 1, set aside a couple hours in week 2 to come back and look at it again. And same thing in week 3, come back and look at it again. And make sure you're repeating and coming back to all of those subjects so that they stay fresh in your mind. And finally, don't forget, you don't need to know everything for the bar exam. There is a ton of information that is tested, and it is very easy to become quickly overwhelmed. You are only shooting to pass here. A passing score on the bar exam is usually between 65 and 70%. You don't need to know everything. So if there are little nuances that slip away from you or just aren't clicking, but for the most part, things are making sense and you're able to remember most of the information, that's okay. No one walks into the bar exam feeling 100% confident about every tiny little piece of information. So hopefully you find these tips helpful, and best of luck on the bar exam.